Welcome everyone to Talking Data with Joel and Mike, powered by Marketsoft. And so if you haven't seen our recent podcasts, we mix it up, and today we're actually unpacking a three-part series across an interesting topic. We're a charity. We can't afford not to do it. And we'll debate that one today, and we'll follow the other part series around AI and also data-driven investment decisions that are really hitting our sector. We're very grateful to have our special guest, Nigel Harris, join us today. Hi, Nigel. Former CEO of Mocatta Foundation and now consulting across the sector to many boards and executive teams, so has a lot of experience to talk to in this space. And Michael Mocatta, if people haven't met Michael Mocatta, a strategic solutions director at Marketsoft, and a subject matter expert in many of these topics that we're going to be talking today. So lots to dig into. So to kick off today, it's going to be a fairly conversational session over the next sort of 25 minutes. I'll hand it to Nigel. So really around this interesting topic that we're kicking off the series is that you're hearing across different meetings in execs and boards is this concept of we can't afford it. And so when you hear that, well, what do you hear underneath those words?
What I hear is you don't know what your job is, pretty much, which is a fairly blunt challenge, I guess, in saying that. But what I hear in any organisation saying they can't afford it, I would say, so you can't afford to serve your purpose. Because if you can't afford to do that, it's fundamental to why you exist, then perhaps there's a bigger challenge to say, well, why are we here at all? And it's not to say that you should be charging off and spending at will, or you can somehow magically invent resources. But this constraint or deficit strategy or thinking is a complete barrier to serving purpose, which is really the reason that charities exist.
Yeah, and I think we can all share stories of hearing similar words in various meetings. And Mike, so from your perspective, what do you think the hidden cost of underinvesting in the mission and the impact of what charities are there for?
Yeah, look, I think at the end of the day, understandable to understand that charities have a very particular mindset around saving costs or trying to spend money wisely. But at the same time, we've engaged quite a number of charities over the years, and you can see a lack of investment in key areas across those organisations, which has an impact both on their cause and also on those that are supporting them. And I think that it's a mindset that has to change, basically. Otherwise, charities will just continue to produce mediocre type results in certain parts of their business, and that's an area that needs to have a greater focus.
It's a zero-sum game, isn't it, really, though? Just listening to what you're saying there, Mike. If you continue to take that deficit position, you just end up doing little, if anything.
That's right. Yeah, it's what is it? A race to the bottom.
Yep.
And it's little things. It's even little things like just employing people with the right skills and knowledge in certain parts of the business, and paying for those skills as well, right, to be able to get the best outcomes. The charity industry is the largest employer in the country, but when you sort of engage with many charities, you sort of scratch your head in terms of the type of investment they've made in key roles, or lack of investment in key roles is probably the thing that sort of astounds me the most. But if you go into the financial sector and other sectors that are theoretically more mature in many respects, they understand the value of having the right people in the right roles, and paying for those roles to get the best possible outcome.
Yeah, Nigel, you've probably also on the flip side seen some pretty strong positive stories where they have invested. So, are there examples that you can share where you've seen it really work, like so people can essentially emulate that mindset?
Yeah, I can. And just to make a comment before I elaborate on that, Joel, I guess the way I look at this and find myself often talking about it is if you think about the factors of production, land, labour, enterprise and capital, in a charity or a non-profit organisation, really the most fundamental factor of production you have at your disposal is labour. So whether it be paid staff or volunteers, but it's people. I mean, you don't trade in lands and capital you go to market to seek, and you do that through labour, and enterprise enables you to do that. So to Mike's point, investing in the people in the business, both in terms of delivering a service but enabling that service to be delivered, is critical. So thinking about the longitudinal nature, because you're also in a long-term game, so you're serving a long-term purpose, you need a long-term business model to suit. So I guess just to answer your question, the organisational experience I'm most familiar with is the organisation I led for over 2 decades, and in fact left there 5 years ago tomorrow, as the dates turn out. But we had a very strong focus on building and growing people, particularly in a relationship business. And so the sorts of metrics that we really looked at, for example, were tenure. There's research tells us this, as well as anecdotal information of this high turnover in fundraising staff, 16 to 18 months. So we were tracking it around 4.5 to 5 years average turnover, which meant you could have people in positions across an organisation for long enough to know the business, for long enough to know the people, for long enough to sustain relationships, and to continue to hand on to next and to next, so that the business continuity was maintained. And looking at that certainly was one of the key reasons the organisation grew exponentially over that time, and has continued sort of well past my time to thrive even further. So it's one example, but I think that attention to investing in the attraction and retention of people, which is about education and support, it's about reward, which isn't about dollars all the time. In fact, we often go to the side of the purse, if you will, to think about how we remunerate people just in dollars, but in other experiences that grow people through their career development as well, and recognise a life balance in that too. So treating people well.
So how does it, I mean, given our podcast, we have a data flavour to our discussions. Where do you see data feeding into that framework of both success and failure? Because I think there's, I think you've shared with us before around the 4 Ds or the framework that really underpins either success or misunderstanding.
Yeah, well, I think in terms of understanding the progression of any charity or non-profit, it's a business after all in that sense, is having good information. So clearly that's predicated on really good data structures and foundations, but understanding what you're measuring. So I think the model you're referring to is a 4-dimensional measurement model I talk about, where beyond measuring finance, and I see, naturally organisations measure finance, but I see often that measurement is quite static. It's measured in the moment. We've just ticked past June 30, so the clock's reset again in the metric framework to 12-month frameworks, and frankly, that tells you nothing. So you need good data to be able to keep your financial records with enough of a longitudinal view to go back and to project to the future. But projecting or measuring, I should say, program efficacy. So looking at programs that generate revenue as well as programs that deliver services, measuring that relies on good effective data sets. Measuring relationships. So how do you track and prioritize and continue to keep in touch with the relationships that are important in your business? And data absolutely sustains that. It can certainly be an expedience factor in giving you key relationships, and ultimately time. Time is always your friend, and again, maintaining good data over a long period of time, so you've got a consistency of record keeping and tracking information, so you've got a comparability, is critical as well.
Yeah.
And how I would see it, to add to that, is that to facilitate all of that, you need good analysts, you need good data people within the organisation. You need a team, a proper dedicated team that the organisation can lean on. And as Nigel was referring to, the longer the tenure, the better they have an understanding of the not-for-profit industry, a better understanding of that particular charity, because not all charities are equal in terms of the type of engagement they have in the community. And so investing in that is fundamental. The mistake I see charities make time and time again is that they think it's the technology is the solution. Right now, it's important to have a balance in terms of technology, but often they'll throw new tech at a problem, thinking that's going to solve all the issues. But in actual fact, they just don't have the skills in house to actually, build that data resource and leverage that data resource from an operational perspective in a true sense. And that's where I think charities need to rethink how they build up their internal teams around that particular part, and make it one of the pillars of the organisation. Make data and the team that supports that as a pillar to the overall goal of the organisation in terms of being able to facilitate their objectives, right? Business objectives and community objectives. It's frustrating sometimes, because when you engage different charities and you ask them for the simplest of things, often they may have one person in that organisation who's may fall into that skill bucket, but they're so overwhelmed that they are a massive bottleneck in terms of being able to deliver anything to the rest of the organisation. And so all they're doing is just fighting fires, and they're not actually able to do their job properly. And I think the other thing I see is where charities are bringing on, let's just say, young university students, which is fine, and they're skilling them up, but they're not working on, as Nigel sort of alluded to, is retaining them for long, for more than 18 months, right? Because all they're doing is getting their first job, getting some skills in Salesforce or whatever platform it might be, and then they're going elsewhere because there's better opportunities, whether that's from a skills development, or it could be salary orientated, it could be life work balance and all that sort of stuff that just forces them to move on to other areas, because they're either overworked within in a charity that is not necessarily investing in that part of the organisation.
Yeah, and measuring the actual cost on this is fascinating. I'd love to hear some perhaps numbers from you, Nigel, because I mean, my personal experience is definitely time and time again that so many projects get delayed or on pause because of literally just resourcing and capacity and no other reason. Like, it's not budget or timings or anything else. And so these are major campaigns, and so I'm guessing that in some cases it can be millions of dollars that just never see the day of light.
Well, I suspect there's a huge opportunity cost that just lies below the surface, that's neither accessible nor measurable. And because of that being the case, you can flip past it. But I think a lot of it's also about how we even frame our understanding of what we're doing. So I hear a lot of conversation in market, in fact, a dominant conversation about costs. So cutting costs, constraining costs, keeping costs down. I actually don't think the charities are in the business to constrain costs, because you don't serve human purpose if you do that. You're in the business of value creation. So value creation necessitates investment. And it's not to say that some sort of carte blanche to spend at will and again do whatever pleases you, but you've got to think about this, I would say to any charity, from the perspective of what you're trying to accomplish, not from what you are not doing, such as spending money. So I think that's a factor. Another observation I make, and picking up with your observation, Joel, but also Mike's, is this siloed notion of activity in organisations. So taking the example with data, there's almost a singularity of function which sort of stops other things happening in and around it. So thinking about the way an organisation works as a system, where the parts actually work together across the whole of a business and then its particular business areas, is critical as well. So I think in all of that, it changes arguably a way that you think about what you do and how you measure what you do. So rather than thinking about cost, you think about investment. And that can sound all very cute and just a play on words, but there's a fundamental difference, I believe, in how you frame the work you are doing and how you understand that to what you actually end up accomplishing. And so can you put a number around those costs we talk about, those hidden costs? I don't think so. But I think if you start to prosecute it differently, you begin to see what those opportunities are like.
Yeah. Is it because related to that is the other thing you've talked a fair bit about is when you say like the investment, it's not about so much return on investment or your classical financial ROI. You talk about more return on impact or return on cause. Yeah.
Well, I think there are a number of measurement points. So absolutely. Again, none of this is to say that you don't or you shouldn't be focused on financial outcomes, but understanding what the drivers of those financial outcomes are and understanding what is delivered as a result of those financial contributions are as well. So here I'm talking about, if you're just measuring dollars and revenue streams without really thinking about where those dollars have come from and why, and what are those dollars contributing to in terms of human outcomes. So measuring the impact of relationship evolution, measuring the impact of services delivered and what that human experience, and even relating those back so that those who give understand what they're accomplishing with and through an organisation. So again, it's just thinking about that holistic view or that systems approach rather than trying to chunk things down and pouring over a P&L and pretending that it means something that it really doesn't as you look at it by month or by quarter or by year.
Yeah. I could probably relate even a conversation today with guide dogs about I thought I was impressed rather than talking about the sort of return on particular programs, they actually just kept flipping to the number of dogs they were going to be able to train up and the number of people they're going to be able to serve, which I thought that was very sort of more in touch or more holistic thinking.
Well, that's a why you exist denominator, isn't it? When you really talk about that translation into lived experience, so number of people impacted, number of, in this case, dogs trained to enable that to happen, or other devices and processes that help people navigate through vision impairment. So yes, all of that's really important, and to understand how that gets to be is that critical question. But we kind of used to bringing things back to dollars, and I think often creating a pretense that we truly understand what they're telling us. I'm not sure that we do all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is where I think a lot of organisations that are, let's say, living on the edge. I'll say living on the edge, where sometimes the bean counters end up having more power within the organisation in terms of costs and so on, and sometimes it does make sense, but other times what it does is it inhibits the organisation to actually grow and to do its job, because there's a gap in understanding of from an accounting perspective as to what parts of the business in my mind are actually, are generating future revenue and future income, because it's not always obvious on paper, because it boils back down to relationships and those sort of things, right? So, and that's where it becomes very dangerous, I think, for some organisations to be fall into that trap, and a lot of organisations do, right? And so they're watching the dollars very, very carefully, but they're not really focusing on what areas are going to generate future growth, because those areas tend to get cut because it's not obvious from an ROI perspective.
An example of that, Mike, is we've just ticked over June 30, so we're into a new financial year. So the last quarter, I would contend, so the last 3 months, there would have been a number of organisations, a frenzy, an ever-growing focus on getting money in to try and meet budget. Now, I don't know how to put this in any kind of terms, but really, most donors, probably no donors, really care whether you meet your budget or not.
Yeah,
have no interest. They care about what they're funding. And those artificial timelines we create with financial year ends also are of little meaning, really, except if you're going to be making donations at a particular time that suits you for your tax purposes, as any of a number of us may have done in the last week or more. So, and it doesn't stop that frenzy, and I've been guilty of being focused on that from a management perspective in the past as well. But when you sit back and look at it, it doesn't make sense. But worse still, it distracts you from doing the things that you need to be doing in a longer term focus. So instead of running around accomplishing potentially not much at all, keeping that long game at play before and through end of financial year, and coming into a new financial year, and keeping that discipline attended to and focused will elevate those outcomes. But that's not always what we do.
No, that's right. It's an analogy could be not-for-profits fall in the trap of speed dating rather than dating long-term, dating from a perspective from a long-term relationship, right? And so, so it's focusing, as you rightly point out, on these artificial milestones or dates during the year from a speed dating point of view that maybe not convenient for the donor.
There's a risk of being polyamorous without sincerity, but it's an interesting conundrum. But yeah, look, I think that, and again, the burst of energy and then that sort of cyclic approach. It's I'm sort of thinking of whirling dervishes, that spin around in some sort of trance-like behaviour, and then at the end of all of that, you collapse for a while. So just thinking about different rhythms and different patterns of behaviour, again, are driven from data and measurement, and enabled to see a longer game being played outside of those constraints or those frameworks that we create for ourselves, but really have little real meaning in market.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at in the commercial sector, there's certain businesses that ignore all of those, Christmas / financial year, end of financial year. There's a lot that do obviously still get sucked into that. But there are some very highly successful businesses that, like the Apples of the world and so on, who don't discount. They don't have end of year financial sales. They don't have Christmas sales and all that sort of stuff. They'll have product releases at certain times of the year, and which might be a traditional time of year which they do it, which everybody looks forward to. But they're about just developing a long-term solid relationship with their customers, right? So that their customers won't move on, because their customers are so entrenched with their products and their customer service that you just don't want to go anywhere else. And there's a number of businesses that have that model out in market that are very, very successful. The ones that tend to fall into the end of year sales and all that sort of stuff, they're trying to find thin margins. It's 1 year, a few years they may be successful, and then all it takes is 1 or 2 bad years, and they're finding themselves in dire financial trouble. So yeah, and I think it's sort of the charity industry sort of has a habit of falling into the same problem. You know, it's the more successful charities are the ones that are developing solid long-term relationships and continually engaging their donors in a way that sort of makes them feel like a part of the family, as opposed to, hey, it's it's end of financial year, I need all your money.
Well, absolutely, and I think then and that's borne out in evidence as well as market experience. But you know, the thing that kind of amuses me now that I'm in a different dimension, I suppose, and looking at through an advisory and governance lens. But you know, there's all sorts of activity that would have happened in the last few months to get tax appeals out, as there will be a few months on for Christmas. I don't know too many donors that are sitting at home waiting for that tax appeal or the Christmas appeal to drop so they can respond to it.
Yeah, that's right, exactly.
So, you know, it's like, why the fuss? Now, you know, I get it. There are some cyclic pieces which make some sense, at least perhaps in this time of year. But, you know, maybe I'm very much an outlier, but none of the gifts I make are in response to any appeals I get. They simply are made because of the organisations I'm involved with, who I feel part of. And I know that at this time of year, it suits me to do that just for my own financial purposes. But it's nothing to do with anything that I've received.
Yeah, it's the same here with me as well, with the charities that I sort of donate to. I do it because, you know, I think the cause is good. I have, you know, some sort of relationship with that charity, and you know, they've got a relationship with me. So I think that that's probably part of the secret sauce for charities to focus on and building up good relationships. And that sort of means that you've got to figure out what's the best communication channels for your donors, right?
Absolutely.
They're not always going to be the same. You know, some charities maybe you know, have an older demographic that have some very specific channels, and then if it's a you know, a charity that's working with the younger demographic, there's different channels altogether, right? And donations and volunteering of time are two different things as well, right? So yeah, the stats are that younger people are more likely to donate time because, you know, they don't necessarily are in a position to donate financially.
They probably have more time than money in the most of the case, so you can do that. Exactly. So absolutely. And look, just not to say that appeal activities and other activities are wrong. They're not at all. They serve a very useful purpose in their right place with the right people. But this bringing it right back to the data question and to anchor, you know, this conversation back to data. This is where, as you've touched on, good data structures, understanding what you are working with, good analysis enables you to have the right conversations with the right people in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, that's right.
Is there one or two sort of key things that you would typically share with our audience out of everything we've discussed today that are top of the list that you would either go back to a board member, an executive, or even a management member of that needs to persuade their leadership on this?
Yeah, my challenge question going to organisational leaders is, what price do you need to pay to serve your purpose?
Right.
And to think about that in terms of thinking about what investment you need to put into the organisation that serves a purpose that actually changes something, that actually shifts something for people's experience. So what is that price, if you will, or that investment that actually gets you to that end game into the future? And that framework or that paradigm, the way of looking at it, I think shifts it from a cost-based deficit position into an investment value creation, changing futures concept.
Yeah, and Mike, from what you're sharing,
my statement would be that I don't think charities can afford not to do it. To be truthful, it has to be seen as a core pillar. We're in the information age. We're migrating into the artificial intelligence age, and data will become even more imperative. So, businesses need to, specifically in the not-for-profit industry, they need to make the investment. They can't put their head in the sand anymore. I don't believe. Like, there was a time when you could sort of say, look, there's enough revenue coming in, and Australia is a very generous country in itself in terms of donations. You could get away with not doing it, but I don't think since COVID, I don't believe it's something that charities can afford not to do anymore.
Yeah, well, that you've given maybe a good segue into our second part to our podcast that will be coming out soon, which will be a real sort of dive into our future world in artificial intelligence. And essentially, this will start to touch on all these topics we've talked about today around, people and relationships and data and really capacity is going to be one of the really interesting areas that we'll see. So so we'll wrap it up today. And so I'd like to thank Mike and Nigel joining us for our Talking Data with Joel and Mike.